Hello, my name's Lakara and I'm a careers consultant here at Queen Mary. It's lovely to be able to welcome you to this webinar where we'll be exploring how you can take care of your well-being while managing your job hunt, which can be a really tricky thing to do, as some of you may already have experienced. So before I launch into the content of our session, I just want to draw a few things to your attention. So as we go along, I've prepared some questions for us to kind of grapple with and discuss. And I really want to encourage you just to answer those questions as we go along, because I think more than anything, you all have probably stood in each other's shoes in one way or another, and you can all serve as, a potential support system as well. So that would be really fantastic. And the best way for you to engage is through the chat box. So at the bottom of your screen, you should see a little area that says chat. So if you could just confirm that you've seen that for me, that would be fantastic. If you could type in hi, that would be great. And that will also just confirm for me that you can hear me as well. Perfect. So I can see you typing away, which is fantastic. Hi, Leela. Wonderful. Okay. So this is a really timely conversation, actually. So well-being is often talked about in the context of entering higher education and having to adapt to new surroundings and new ways of doing things. But I think it's equally important to discuss it in relation to the period of adjustment that follows graduation. So whether you're graduating at 21 or perhaps as a mature student, this can be, a time of massive change and unfamiliarity. So when it comes to your career, I think you might, potentially identify with one of the following stages. So the first is, there may be some who have an idea of what kind of job you want, but no idea how to get there. There might be some who have no idea about what you want. And to be honest, about 10 years ago when I was in your shoes, this was me. And then also there may be another category of people who have a job lined up, but perhaps you're a little bit anxious about what it means to be in a professional environment. So yeah, if that sounds like you, you're not alone at all. So I think if you've expressed an interest in coming along to this kind of webinar, it's likely that you have kind of come across some kind of stumbling blocks and found it quite difficult. And again, I just want to emphasize that this isn't something that's specific to you. It's likely that most graduates, if not all, at one point or another feel exactly the way you do. So I'm going to be kind of peppering in my own experiences as well. So if nothing else, you probably feel a lot better about how much progress you've made as compared to me when I was in your shoes. But in addition to that, we'll have a chance just to put our heads together and explore the following areas. So we'll think about how we define success. We'll think about resilience. We'll think about imposter syndrome, which some of you may have heard of before. And we'll also think about how we can adjust our view as a potential means of kind of managing our well-being as well, because I think perspective is quite key here. So by the end of our time together, you should recognize that you're not alone in feeling the way you do. Understand how you might begin to reframe difficult or disappointing moments in your job search, and then distinguish between the pressures that we place on ourselves and those that might be unwittingly placed on us by others. So again, a quick disclaimer before we delve in. So, realistically, it does take quite a bit of time and practice to develop your own strategies for managing your well-being. In fact, it's really quite a personal experience based around the things that you enjoy. And again, it's likely to evolve as you do as well. But once you've got that strategy down, it's something that you can integrate into your own schedule. So the point that I'm making really is that, I don't want you to get the idea that by the end of this webinar, you'll have everything sussed out. But this is just going to provide a bit of a framework and the basis for an ongoing conversation. So if you do want to have a little bit more of a specific or tailored conversation about how you can manage your well-being, do feel free just to book in an appointment and I'll be very, very happy to speak to you one-to-one. All right then, so hopefully that all sounds good, so we can make a start. All right then, so how can we at Queen Mary help you during this time? So some of you may not intuitively view careers and enterprise as a service that you'd use to manage your well-being during your job search, but I really want to encourage you and let you know that there is a space for you to do this, but within certain parameters. So, we're not actually a counselling service. So what does that mean in practice for you? So in terms of the way that we operate our appointments, our primary mission to you as students and now graduates, it centers around offering personalized and accessible information, advice, and guidance. So actually, it's really important if you give us as much context as you feel is relevant so that we can support you in the right way. And on top of that, we offer impartial and confidential information, advice, and guidance. So it's not about judging you or your circumstances. You're very much welcome and encouraged to give us all of the kind of full spectrum of what's been going on for you so that we can adapt our approach accordingly. So actually, if you are feeling quite demoralized, overwhelmed, or stressed about issues related to your job search, sharing this information means that we're able just to, kind of really accommodate you and potentially, commit to supporting you on an ongoing basis. So at the moment, I'm offering some graduate coaching sessions, and you can have those, as many of those as you might need, so that we can really kind of get you feeling quite confident and boosted up in that respect. So hopefully that sounds good, and it does give you a starting point as well for our time after this webinar. Okay then, so why don't we begin to think about one of the trickier things, which is defining success. So what does success look like to you? So I remember when I was at your stage, there was this massive gulf between where I felt I was starting out and where I wanted to wind up. And to be honest, I think one of the trickier things that I found is that I really hadn't given my career a great deal of thought. So I kind of felt a little bit like I was wading around in the dark, but I knew that it was important for me to be successful, whatever that meant. So I've got a question for you. Thinking about your own career, what does success look like from your perspective? So if you could just type something in the chat box, just give me a sense of what that might be. So it could be a specific job. It could be a particular sector that you want to work in. It could be, a firm statement. So success looks like blah, blah, blah. It could potentially be a number of different elements. But, I'm curious to know from your perspective what success actually looks like, or what it might consist of. So if you could just type some suggestions for me, that would be really fantastic. I'm quite curious to know, about some of the things that you've been thinking about. So thanks, we've got a couple of people typing there, which is lovely. All right then, so while you're generating some ideas on that and typing away, I think it's worth mentioning that many of us will have very different ideas about what success looks like in practice, and that's absolutely fine. And to be honest, I think it's to be encouraged. I think it's also worth bearing this in mind the next time you kind of fall into the cycle of comparing yourself to other people. And this inevitably happens at this time in your life. So for a really long time, many of us would have used our friends or our classmates as a benchmark for success. We may have compared our grades. If they're doing a certain kind of work experience, we may be kind of compelled to do similar things, or if they're getting part-time jobs, we follow suit. However, it's worth remembering that one of the really fantastic but potentially scary things about this period of time is, you have the control to carve out a career path that's specific to you. So thank you, Leela Griffith. So you said success looks like doing a job you enjoy, not just to pay the bills, and I couldn't agree with you more. I think, again, one of the things that I didn't have a sense of when I was in your shoes is exactly what a good job would be. But I definitely knew that going into work every day and enjoying it and feeling that sense of fulfillment was really key. So thank you so much for sharing that. That's fantastic. So I have a couple of other ideas as well. So for some of you who, again, may not have any kind of firm ideas, it could be related to the company that you're working for. Perhaps they have a certain kind of reputation, or there's some prestige attached to the company. It might well be related to the content of the role. So what you get to come in. So I think this is what Layla was referring to. So, what it is you get to do on a daily basis. It might well be your salary. So, I know people can be quite coy when thinking about money, but yeah, you have to live and your salary is quite important. Some of you may also be thinking about location. So, who you get to work with. Maybe diversity is quite important for you as well. And for others, it could well be to do with travel. So you might want to work for a firm that has international offices. So this isn't an exhaustive list, but it's just some of the things that people tend to reflect on when it comes to their definition of success. All right then. So we've touched on this a moment ago. So it's about taking charge. So we're going to move on now to an exploration of the extent to which we feel we're in control of our careers and the potential impact of external influences in this respect. All right then, so who's really in control? So, I don't know about you, but I feel most comfortable and most confident when I feel like I've got a sense of ownership, or at least the ability to influence a particular situation, especially if a challenge crops up. So, realistically, the extent to which we're able to control our circumstances is impacted by a number of different factors. So, naturally, one of those huge factors is going to be those people who are closest to us, those in our inner circle. So I've got a question for you, and just a reminder of those who joined us, for those who joined us a little bit later, the best way for you to get involved is in the chat box. So it would be great if you could put that to practice with this question. So my question for you is your definition of success entirely shaped by you, or do you feel like your peers, your friends, and or family might play a role? So I'll give you a little bit of time to thank you. Got a couple of people typing in, that's fantastic. So I'll refer to those in a moment. So I'll address the first one. So if you do feel like you've got total ownership over your future, that's fantastic because I think it gives you room to prioritize your own wants and needs. But you might still find a level of responsibility that comes with this quite daunting. But with that said, it's worth remembering that even if you recognize your power in shaping your career aspirations, it really doesn't mean that you have to or that you even should do everything on your own. Very rarely do people thrive professionally in isolation. Your networks are key. And I know that networks, that's a word that makes people's blood run cold. I'm quite a shy person, so I can't stand the idea of like conventional networking. But we can touch on some alternatives a little bit later in this presentation. But again, just one network that you've got in the bag already, again, is access to careers and enterprise. So you've got us for 2 years. You can come in for one-to-ones. You've got access to our events, our resources, our webinars, and by extension, all of the other professional networks that we've got as well. So is that Tajmila? So you said a combination of both. So you feel like, yeah, I think that's probably the case for a lot of people. There are a number of different factors that are kind of going to determine how much, what our definitions of success look like, and maybe external pressures as well. So I think that's fine. And Lily, you said family play a big role for me as successful. Yeah, you've got successful figures to live up to. So I've got an example that you might be able to relate to there in a couple of slides' time. But yeah, I completely empathize with both of you. So if we maybe take friends as our first example then that we can work through. So to be honest, I think this is so common for friends to play a massive role in what our definitions of success are. And again, it kind of going back to what I was saying about using them as a benchmark. So very frequently I have third years and graduates who come in for appointments and they're thinking about their job search, and usually they're quite frantic about it. And they're constantly speaking in terms of what their friends or their classmates are doing. And I wonder how many of you can relate to that, kind of feeling like you're being swept away in a tide of what other people are doing. So with that said, I've got a question for you, which is, are you competing or are you creating your own lane? So let me put that in context. So again, many moons ago when I was a recent graduate, I remember, particularly when things started to get quite tough and I wasn't hearing from as many jobs or employers as I would have liked to, I remember there were moments where I began to compare myself to friends who I felt were making a lot more progress than I was. And I really started to get quite demoralized to the point where I was thinking, oh, well, the work experience I have got, that's rubbish. I won't even bother to include that in my CV, which is a huge mistake. So, I mean, just for a little bit of context about me, I'm from quite a working class background, and I went to a university where I felt, a lot like a fish out of water, because so many of my peers and my friends at the time had access to a lot more in terms of their career opportunities and building work experience and that kind of thing. However, I think a far more valuable use of my time would have been just to redirect that attention away from what I believed or perceived other people to be doing, and just to kind of refocus that on me. So it would have been far more productive, I think, and far kinder to myself, just to identify those contexts in which I had developed skills and really play them up and just develop a strong vocabulary around couching and framing my skills to the very best of my ability. Because it's like I always tell students, people can go around doing as much work experience as they want, if you're not able to tease out those key skills, and if you're not able to frame it in such a way that the employer can really assess them, it's almost no point in having done it. So your ability to communicate and identify skills, I think, is really, really key. Um, so yeah, hopefully that helps. I mean, I think in life you're always going to find that there are people who, it seems like they've done it all, but that isn't a reflection on you and what your capabilities are. Okay, so adjusting your perspective then. So this is one of the practices that I find can be quite useful when it comes to managing your well-being. So, how you can begin to reframe things. So I think that instead of comparing yourself to your friends frequently, it can be quite a good idea to rethink, well, actually, is there another way that I can begin to engage with them? And, asking for advice is a really good place to start. So I think a lot of us get bogged down in this way of thinking that, again, going back to that dreaded word, networking, a lot of us begin to think, well, the only valuable networks are the people that I meet while I'm standing in a suit awkwardly, after an event. And actually, the people that I think some of the most effective networks are those we already know. So it could be relatives and family members, it could be, our friends, those people in our kind of immediate circle. And don't get the idea that they have to have been doing the same job that you aspire to do. It could be that maybe they've got further along in the recruitment process and they've got some experience of interviews and assessment centres. It might be that they've submitted application forms to companies that you aspire to apply to. They might have some valuable insights there. It might be that they have contacts and their extended networks that they can put you in touch with, or perhaps a list of top tips, or even just general advice and support. So very often, again, we tend not to speak up about feeling quite demoralized or the kind of more tricky things associated with job hunting. But I think probably among your friends, there are a lot of similar feelings and a lot of similar struggles. So why not put your heads together and kind of talk through the experience and see if you can collaborate on things as well. Maybe reviewing each other's CV, doing a bit of proofreading, sending each other jobs, that kind of thing. So again, your friends don't have to become your competitors. All right then, so family influence. So Leela and Tajmila, I think you both alluded to this being quite an important one. So this may not apply to everybody else, but again, I can also empathize with the two of you because I remember, feeling quite anxious about not wanting to let anyone down by not having a job soon enough or not having the right kind of job. And perhaps, as Leela was saying, if you've got an older sibling or a cousin or some other relative, you can kind of feel a little bit of pressure to live up to them. So if this does resonate with you, I have a quote here. So this is from Serena Williams, and she says, "There were two Venus Williamses in our family. It was crazy. At restaurants, my parents would make me order first, but once she ordered, I'd change my mind. It was tough for me to stop being Venus and become the person I am." Now, with Serena Williams kind of stepping us out of her sister's shadow and carving her own identity, we can all see the kind of positive benefits that she's accrued from that. So she's arguably one of the greatest sports people of all time. And so, I think it's quite heartwarming to know that even some of the greats have felt exactly the way that we have. Now, bringing it back to us, there are different kinds of cultural implications when it comes to challenging or maybe disagreeing with family, which can be quite tricky to address in a webinar. So if you do want to have that conversation, you're welcome to bring that up maybe at a one-to-one with me, because again, I kind of understand some of those things as well. But just to open it up a little bit more, I think one of the biggest issues when it comes to dealing with family and communicating with them about this particular period of time is there are kind of generational gaps and misunderstandings about what the labour market looks like. So maybe back in their day, having a university degree counted for so much. And I'd say actually, even when I was a graduate, it was kind of the beginning of the time when people were starting to insist that you had loads of work experience. So from their point of view, this whole thing of additional qualifications and internships and work experience is quite a new thing. So I think being able to communicate where you are in your job search and how your sector works, again, whether you will need to do some additional study, whether there is benefit in balancing your time between a part-time job and maybe some voluntary work, having that conversation can really do a lot just to put everything in perspective for them and kind of take the heat off, because I know how it is. When you've been beavering away and writing loads of applications and someone comes in, even with the very best of intentions, and says, how's it all going? Are there any interviews on the horizon? It can feel quite, demoralizing. So yeah, I completely understand. Tajmila, I can see that you're typing as well. Oh, you didn't catch my name. Sorry, my name's Lakara. Yeah, so it's Lacara. Okay. Hopefully that helps. That's no problem. All right then. So yeah, that's just my little blurb on family. But again, I understand it's quite personal. So if you do want to bring this up in a one-to-one in regard to your job search, we can talk about that as a factor. So quick wins. So against, a backdrop of job hunting stress and then the potential insecurity that can come of comparing yourself to others or maybe living up to family expectations, you can kind of feel a little bit swamped. So I've got some quick wins for you. And these are some short-term achievable goals or activities that you can participate in that are great for boosting your morale, great for boosting your confidence, and most importantly for you in terms of your job search, you can accrue some really valuable skills. So I don't want you to fall into this kind of way of thinking that the only valuable things you can do have to be titled internship or volunteering or a master's or something like that. There are really accessible short-term things you can do, a lot of which are completely free as well. So my first point is upskill with a short course. Now, some of you may be going through your job descriptions and person specifications, and you're consistently coming across that bullet point that you think, no, I don't know anything about that. I can't do that. 9 times out of 10, you don't have to do another year of study, although that may be true in some cases. There are short courses that you can do to really kind of develop your experience and skills. So let's say, for instance, you might need to have some knowledge of how to use social media in a professional context, or it might be beneficial, or perhaps you need to develop some a knowledge of a programming language. You've got these online platforms like Coursera and FutureLearn where you can learn those skills for free. And they're actually developed by typically universities, so there might be international ones or ones based in the UK, but they're quite robust and quite thorough. And there's sometimes a cost attached to getting a certificate, but if you don't want the certificate at the end and you just want to do the course, often you don't have to pay. And then you've got kind of on-site, in-person providers like CityLit that do a lot in terms of professional development as well. And it might be a matter of weeks or even like a one-off training session that allows you to really boost some skills. So I've done quite a few Excel training courses there, but they do loads of different things. So you might want to Google them and have a look at their website for options. And then local libraries. So, although a lot of libraries are closing down, there are still really fantastic ones that are quite accessible. So in Bow, quite close to QM, there's a local library that offers a whole range of different things, from courses to things like yoga, art, cookery, aromatherapy. So again, even some like well-being related things as well, and they're quite cheap. So, do have a look and see what's out there, whether it's a personal project you want to develop or one which is professional in nature. There's a lot out there. And of course, I mentioned this before, but thinking about how you can balance paid work with work experience. So some of you might be continuing on with maybe your retail job or something in catering and hospitality. And if you want to think about what you can integrate that's professional in nature, alongside that, come in and see us and we can have a chat with you. And of course, broadening your definition of networking. So we've talked about this in regard to friends, but maybe a list of who you know, what they're doing, and what they might possibly be able to contribute to you in terms of your own progress could be a really good thing to do. You might want to try LinkedIn, and I can't recommend that enough. That's a really fantastic platform for requesting informational interviews and even just taking a look at the profiles of people who are doing jobs that you aspire to do. Have a look and see what they've done in the past, what kind of experience they have. Because sometimes we really overestimate how much work experience we feel we need. And looking at someone's profile can be quite reassuring in that regard, or give us a little bit of guidance. And then there's Eventbrite for booking onto events that may well be social in nature, but a lot of them are careers related or maybe linked to an innovation linked to the sector we want to get into. So great for that commercial awareness. And then most importantly, you want to have fun as well. So, integrate that time into your day or your week where you are just doing the things that you enjoy. So those are some quick wins. But moving on, we're going to think about how you can look after yourself. And we'll be thinking about that in the context of resilience and then managing expectations. So again, against the backdrop of all of these potential stresses, I think you should devote that time to thinking, how can I manage these things so I avoid burning out? And the reality is we can't preempt or even control every single aspect of our job hunt or our lives, sadly. But we can definitely begin to build ourselves up so that we're not completely flawed every time a challenge arises. All right then, so resilience. So I wonder how many of you have heard this word used before in the context of job hunting. If you have, if you just type a quick yes, so I kind of gauge how familiar you are, how many of you have heard of it. Again, that would be in the text box. That would be fantastic. So I think it's become a bit of a buzzword. But once you've found techniques for managing and building your resilience, I think that's half the battle won, to be honest. So yeah, Lily, you said that you have heard of it. So yeah, that's great. Maybe the rest of you aren't quite so familiar, but we can delve into that in a moment. So I've got a definition for you here, and I'm going to read through it. And what I'd really appreciate if you could do is just think about, if you've got any strong reactions or opinions based on this definition. Do you like it? Does it marry up with your own perception of what resilience is? So here's the quote for you. So resilience is that ineffable quality that allows some people to be knocked down by life and come back stronger than ever. Rather than letting failure overcome them and drain their resolve, they find a way to rise from the ashes. Psychologists have identified some of the factors that make someone resilient, among them a positive attitude, optimism, the ability to regulate emotions, and the ability to see failure as a form of helpful feedback. Even after misfortune, resilient people are blessed with such an outlook that they're able to change course and soldier on. So, Tajmila, I can see that you're typing away there. So you've obviously had a reaction to it. So great. So whilst you're typing away, and if anyone else wants to join in with an opinion, you're very, very welcome to and encouraged to. So I'll let you know what I think, and please don't change your perception according to what I think. It's just an opinion. So I think that this is quite an interesting definition because in some respects I fully agree with what they're saying. I do think that resilience is about a positive attitude. It is about optimism, and we have talked about that thus far in our webinar. But what also strikes me as well is that they kind of paint resilience as being almost unattainable, I think, almost painting a picture of these perfect people who just bounce back no matter what's thrown at them. It doesn't seem like there's much room here or much kind of concession for the fact that people do get sad sometimes and we are disappointed. And that's especially true of the job hunt when you've really kind of put your all into a role. Maybe you've seen something that would be perfect fit for you and it doesn't quite go your way. I think we've all been there. I know I've been there. But this is a normal part of being human. So I think the value of resilience is when, you allow yourself to feel sad, you allow yourself to feel disappointed, but not to the point that it completely overwhelms you and you kind of stay in that state for a prolonged period of time. So that's my own opinion. Again, I can see people still typing away. So Tajmini said, I feel like resilience can fluctuate, absolutely. So despite having always believed that once you become resilient, it's a solid state, I think that's so insightful. And I also think, just adding to your point, that people sometimes build resilience in some areas, but when it comes to something that's completely new, the unfamiliarity means that actually we probably are a little bit more vulnerable. So yeah, I really like that statement there. And I saw someone else was typing away. If you do want to finish up, the other person who was typing, I think it was Mamuna, do feel free to finish up your comment and then I'll come back to it. So I'm just going to quickly ease on to my next section, but I will come back to you. So I think in terms of resilience, that tends to be spoken about in terms of, if a challenge does arise, how do we deal with it once it's happened? But I think another really vital part of that is managing expectations, and that's the stage before. And when it comes to your job search, there are a lot of unknowns, but there are also things that we probably can begin to manage our expectations around. Mamuna, just going back to what you said, yeah, it's difficult to explain during the job application process. Yeah, absolutely. So do you mean there that sometimes employers require resilience as a key competency, or just the general difficulty of kind of keeping your retaining some resilience whilst you're applying? Either way, I think it's a pertinent comment. So yeah, in terms of those areas about which we can kind of manage our expectations, I tend to hear three recurring comments or three key concerns from my graduates and my third years. The first is about hearing no. I think that tends to really get under people's skin and really kind of affect them. The next one is about climbing the ladder of success. And then finally, it's about not seeing results as soon as you'd like. So Tajmila, just going back to what you were saying. Oh, so you have to go now. Okay, fantastic. Yeah, so we will be uploading this presentation as well. So you can listen as many times as you like. Thank you so much for your participation. It's been really valuable. And then moving on to what Mamuna has said, the general difficulty of life events outside of the course. Absolutely. So I think, again, with time, as you kind of experience more challenges and you see that it's possible to kind of move beyond them, you will build your resilience quite naturally. So thank you for that. Perfect. So why don't we move on to those three areas that we can begin to build some resilience around by managing our expectations. All right then, so the first one, so you'll probably hear no a lot. So again, people tend to feel really dejected. The more so-called rejections they get, the worse they can feel in terms of the job hunt. So I just want to advise you that no isn't the end of the story. So firstly, it's nothing personal. So people will sometimes talk about being rejected from a job, and I promise you, it's not a company personally attacking your ability to do a job. When they recruit, they've got one or maybe a limited few positions vacant, and inevitably there are going to be loads and loads of applicants. So the kind of hearing no is just an inevitable part of that whole process. So I don't want you to view it as a rejection. It could be any number of factors involved. Like I've sat on recruitment panels before, and sometimes every single person that you see is more than capable of doing the job. And actually you get quite emotional, and kind of it gets quite heated when you're trying to decide between a couple of really fantastic candidates. So don't see it as something that you've done wrong as such. Excuse me. It could just be that you were as good as anybody else, but maybe luck was on the side of another candidate. So this moves me quite nicely onto my next point, which is no can be a learning opportunity. So if you want to try and gain a sense of whether there's anything that you can improve, or maybe how strong a candidate you were, approaching the employer for a bit of feedback on your performance, whether it's the application or the interview, can really shed light on what's going on. And it can be a boost in your confidence to know that maybe you just missed out on the opportunity because someone was that little bit stronger. Or if there are some kind of glaring areas for improvement, you can work on them, and we can work on that with you. You can also use it as a potential source of motivation. So some of you may have heard of the CV of failures. I don't know if that's been brought to your attention before, but it's really interesting, and you can Google it. So there are quite a few of them out there, but the one that tends to be referred to most frequently is by, I think his name is pronounced Johannes Haushofer. And it's just a 2-page document, so structured like a CV, and it's 2 pages worth of all of the opportunities that he didn't get, whether they were university courses, PhD positions, roles as a lecturer. But the beauty of it is that despite all of these knockbacks, he's still managed to become an academic and at Princeton. But it's just quite nice to, well, not nice, but I think it's really interesting to see all of the times where he did fail, but it hasn't been a barrier to him attaining his end goal. Okay, and then the next one is about expanding your horizons. So some of you may kind of get to a point where you've been plugging away at a particular application or a particular sector for ages, and you might just find it quite useful to think, okay, well, where else can I have a similar kind of experience? What other opportunities exist for me to use this this core set of skills or make similar money? And then having a contingency plan can also be quite reassuring as well. So yeah, that covers the first one with some kind of tips on how you can manage expectations there. So next up is the concern that you may not climb the professional ladder in the career that you start off in. So again, many of the third years and the graduates that I work with can often get bogged down with the idea that the career you enter into now is going to determine the course of your life forever. You have to start at the bottom and climb your way to the top. And for some of you, that may be exactly what you want. It may be that you want to start at entry level and you want to climb your way kind of through various levels of seniority. But for others, it may be really different. You may not know what you want to do, and you may just be kind of working on the assumption of, I'm going to apply for this job, it looks good, and I'm going to move on to something else. Now, a lot of people worry that their CV may look quite patchy, but I think if you've got nice chunks of time, so maybe a few years at a time with different employers before you find your feet, and again, you're really skilled in terms of framing your skills that you're accruing in the competencies you're developing in, you can develop what's called a portfolio career. So, lots of different kinds of experiences that, just kind of make you quite a rich, well-rounded candidate. And today's labour market lends itself to that style of working. So the term portfolio career is typically used to describe people who are self-employed or entrepreneurs, but I think it is also one which is more and more applicable to the labour market more broadly. So that's also another thing to be aware of. You can kind of jump around, and that's what I did a lot actually in the early stages of my career. I built loads of different kinds of experience until I found my feet. So you've got that flexibility as well. Don't feel like you have to box yourself in. And next up, it may take longer than you'd hope to see results. So I think this is quite an important one to build or manage some kinds of expectations around. And it goes back to your knowledge of the sector that you want to get into. So some of them are going to require additional years of study, and there's no getting around that. So of course that's going to add time. Some may require a lot of networking. So, building those relationships, gaining insight to, how things work in a particular organization, and so on and so forth. But I think if you do your research and you know what you're getting into, that is really going to give you a sense of perspective on, how long things do actually take. And if you want some help with that, please do come in and see us. Although you may have used it before, but prospects.ac.uk is quite a good resource in that regard, because it gives you nice in-depth job descriptions and a bit of an overview of how things work. But I'll give you an example just based on that. So in a previous role, I used to work with people who wanted to become barristers. I remember seeing this student, and he came in and he was quite resolute, like, I want to be practicing as a barrister by the time I'm 25. But those of you who know what the sector's like, you'll know that actually that isn't how it works. Again, it's so much more about, readiness. It's about how much work you've put in. It's not about the age that you're going to be at when you gain entry into that sector. So some sectors definitely lend themselves quite well to saying, yep, I want to be 21 and begin a career in marketing, or I want to begin a career as a teacher at 25. That's quite tangible, but there are others that, that there are a lot more moving parts involved. So you having an understanding of how things work, I think, is going to be quite key. All right then, so next topic, and we'll look at this very briefly, it's imposter syndrome. So some of you may have come across this term before. Even if you're not familiar with the term, I think you're probably quite familiar with the concept, because I think it's something that we've all probably felt at one point or another. So just to define it for you, in a nutshell, it refers to a pattern of thinking that sees a person doubting their own accomplishments and abilities, and also the worry of being exposed as a fraud. So self-doubt is pretty much what we're talking about here. So, you may have had those moments where you say to yourself, I'm not clever enough to do such and such, or I don't belong in this environment, or even if I get the job of my dreams, I'll end up messing it up. I know I've definitely said that to myself a few times in my career journey, and not just as a graduate, but again, even as I kind of become more and more senior. So I wonder if any of this sounds familiar to any of you. Well, if it does, I just want to reassure you that most people probably feel this way at some point or another. But I think it's especially common to feel like this when you're at the initial stages of your career. So for many of you, as we've said before, entering the world of work is also taking place against the backdrop of just a very new phase in your life. So it would be a little bit weird actually if you didn't feel slightly anxious. Like there's a lot on your plate at the moment. But in terms of this issue of self-doubt and imposter syndrome, I've got another couple of quotes for you from people who were definitely really accomplished. And it's quite nice to know that even they were a little bit kind of apprehensive, or they have had those moments. So the first is from Maya Angelou, and she says, "I've written 11 books, but each time I think, uh-oh, they're going to find out now. I've run a game on everybody and they're going to find me out." And this came from Maya Angelou. Even she felt like that. And then the next is from Sonia Sotomayor, and she's the first Hispanic Supreme Court Justice. And she says, "I've spent my years since Princeton while at law school and in my various professional jobs, not feeling completely a part of the worlds I inhabit. I'm always looking over my shoulder, wondering if I measure up." And she very clearly does measure up, because she's the first, one of the first Hispanic Supreme Court justices. That's, again, an incredible accomplishment. But even there, people doubt themselves and think, no, am I right for this kind of environment? So there are so many things that can swirl about in a person's head when it comes to doubt. But I think, again, going back to resilience, it's about kind of being able to pull yourself away from that and still kind of persevere and press on despite these feelings of self-doubt, because they are common. And in my research for this webinar, I actually found out that people who are incredibly capable and tend to be overachievers are probably most likely to feel these feelings of self-doubt. So, if you do feel this way, you're in good company. All right, and then some more good news for you. So when you do get your graduate role, remember you are in fact still a graduate. No one expects you to know it all. And you should expect to make mistakes, but you should also expect to learn from them. Some of the most valuable lessons that we learn throughout our working careers and in life come from making mistakes, and we all do it. You're not on your own, so you're likely to be part of a team, and a lot of companies are now taking an approach that collaborative work is key. So, you can expect to ask questions and work as part of a team and learn from your peers and influence your peers as well. And for those of you who may want to take the self-employed route, I think, developing a network before you take the plunge is going to be something you want to devote a bit of time and energy to. So it does take time for things to fall into place. So not only are you getting to grips with a new job, it's learning the new kind of office culture. It's just, maybe for the first time, distinguishing between what a friend is and what a colleague is, and is there a difference, and if so, what does that actually look like in practice? So many kind of nuances that go on when it comes to deciphering and decoding the world of work. So give yourself that time to just develop that knowledge. Don't be too hard on yourself. And of course, as we've just said, everyone doubts their ability from time to time. All right, so finally, take care of yourself. So again, factor in that time to enjoy yourself. So you may not be where you want to be as a graduate, but that doesn't mean that you have to punish yourself by sitting down in a dark room somewhere, just hunched over your laptop looking for jobs. Do get out there, do see your friends, and kind of refresh and renew yourself. Maybe try some affirmations. So I'm quite a big fan of quotes, and one of my favorite quotes, especially if I'm feeling a little bit down, is, "If you have no confidence in self, you're twice defeated in the race of life. With confidence, you've won even before you started." So if I've got something to do that I'm quite nervous about, I always just kind of repeat that to myself, and it works. So there might be something that kind of gears you up. Maybe journaling, so like documenting your journey, and kind of seeing how far you've come over a period of time. That can be quite nice to see the transition and the change. You can get a career coach. We're offering graduate coaching, so I can see you on a consistent basis as well and kind of get you feeling a little bit more confident. Speak up. So if people know that you're struggling or there's something that you need some support with, you're far likelier to get it if you speak up. Again, I think a lot of graduates kind of feel like they have to keep everything to themselves and you have to come across as capable. But in life, every single one of us will need to ask for help. And if you do kind of get into a state where you're just not able to kind of pick yourself back up, your resilience is really just kind of at an all-time low. And again, don't feel ashamed if this is you. I think we all can sometimes get into this state of thinking. Do see your GP. That's what your doctors are there for. They can help with this kind of thing. So yeah, that brings us to the end of our time together. Thank you so much for your participation and for joining me this afternoon. As I say, this is the beginning of the conversation, by no means the end, and I hope you found it useful. Yeah, been really lovely to spend some time with you, and do get in touch. Right, thanks so much.